Well, hello, everybody. Arky Shea here. Joe Cordes. We're going to do what we call a little basketballing by associating. Let's do this thing, Joel. We're in the playoffs. I feel like started a month ago. It feels the NBA likes to drag things out a little bit. They're very, very cool with.
They were doing 4 games a night. How many more can you cram in there in the first round?
How about the Celtics? I think played game 1 and game 2 like 6 days apart. It felt like it may have been like 4 days apart or something. But come on, like let's not act like it doesn't happen. I'm not saying they didn't cram 4 in a night sometimes, but let's not also like that they're trying to make the scheduling work for everybody like myself. You know what? That's not the issue in this here podcast. The issue in this here podcast is you're looking at 2 guys whose teams are moving on. We're going on to the semis of our respective conferences. That's right. My New York Knickerbockers taking on your Minnesota Timberwolves is now destined to happen now that both teams are in the Western semis. We're going to talk about those series and the future coming up. Let's start with the game that finished last night. What I call an easy 6-game sweep by the Knicks over the Philadelphia 76ers. 118-115. Jalen Brunson goes ham. The Knicks do very, very well. Can I just start it with this?
Okay? Yes, please.
I have spent the better part of 3 days thinking about this because my Knicks fandom goes back to like 1990, comfortably 1993, probably a little 92 that I can remember when I'm like 7 years old.
Yeah. Which coincidentally is about the time that I started NBA awareness too. I was a couple years after you, or a couple years older than you, but right around that time too. 92, 93 is when it really was taken off for me as well.
Yeah, and I'm being probably a little generous with being fandom. I probably just saw the colors and that they were on TV, and I was like, "Hey, this is gonna be my day. This is cool."
Yep.
I put a lot of thought into this over the last 3 days, and it's hard for me to say this without a little bit of hyperbole, but I don't think I can find any after actually doing some hardcore thinking about it. I didn't just go on Twitter and just tossed out this hot take, which, by the way, my Twitter doesn't exist anymore. Good job, everybody, trying to find it. Jalen Brunson's the second best New York Knick of my lifetime. Like, Jalen Brunson clearly is the guy that this franchise needed to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Ewing's number 1 for me. Number 2 is Jalen Brunson. And believe me, I have huge love in my heart for John Starks and Allen Houston and Larry Charles Oakley's my guy, right? Like,
but those guys aren't. You're right. They're not top.
And I can appreciate Melo when he came in and he sort of stabilized the franchise a little bit, right? They actually were pretty good for a year or two under him.
Yeah. I mean, he was no Eddie Curry, but who is?
There's only one Eddie Curry. He's the second greatest Knick of my lifetime.
Yeah.
I saw this stat. Some guy on TikTok did it, so I'll have to give him credit if I ever knew his name. So it's not my original thought. But check out this statisticaroo. The 15 years before Jalen Brunson got to New York. So we're talking basically 15 years before, like 2 years ago.
The time before time, if you will.
The time before time. New York Knicks point guards went for 30-plus points 13 times. Jalen Brunson has done it 40.
The Knicks do not have a long run, and this is in my memory too, dating back into the 90s. They don't have a long run of, like, all-star caliber point guards. They've been really good at other positions. Typically, it's been the forwards or sometimes centers for them, but of point guards, no. So that doesn't surprise me.
And it includes the magical run of Jeremy Lin, right? Like that minute and a half where he was scoring 500 points a game, it felt like. That includes Starbury being a captain among captains. By the way, underrated player. I don't think gets his due for being a pretty good player in the NBA.
Yeah, Marbury. It's the way he went out, and it's the way that things
deteriorated
in Minnesota, and then at every other stop after that. But no one can no one can question the talent. And the first 5-6 years of Marbury's career, he's one of those 5-6 year guys where it's the front end, and there's like, yeah, he was good.
I'm not saying he's an all-time great. I'm just saying we quickly forget about someone like that. He just sort of becomes like, the Walmart sneaker Stephon Marbury kind of thing. You're like, well, I mean, made affordable sneakers for kids who wanted to be sort of looking. They were out of it. Anyway, regardless of all that, this is also, I think, maybe the single greatest individual season and effort from a New York Knicks since I've been alive.
Okay.
His regular season, phenomenal. And his postseason has been MVP worthy.
Yeah, somehow it got even better, right?
Exactly. Like, dude is literally changing back the way the Knicks fans used to think about this franchise. And that is a loyal fan base that is diehard, that wants to be great and is dying for somebody like him to be the guy. And Julius Randle, love the guy. Poor man's MVP. We've talked about it for years here.
Yeah, and we hope he gets back too. We hope that there's some way, some miracle for that to happen. It's not gonna. But
Jalen Brunson's the guy this city needs. And I'm not even talking about this city like my city, right? Like I'm in Alabama. What do I care? But like that franchise, that fan base, oh man. If it's just Julius Randle, and no, I don't think they take thousands of seats from Philadelphia fans in Game 4. I don't think that happens. I think there's an excitement. I mean, they're chanting MVP at him in Philadelphia after he goes back to back with like Joel Embiid has this MVP performance, and then the next night, Jalen Brunson says, "I'll see you with that. How about 49? Is that good for you? Is that good enough?" And I'll tell you, this was a fun series for me to watch. I never really doubted New York until like they were down like 77-71 in the third. Like a little bit, I was like, I don't know. I'm not really liking how the refs are calling this. It's not a great thing.
Philly fought him. I mean, we'll give him credit. Philly fought him the whole way.
But, you and I talked about this. We thought this would be a really good series, a competitive series. And even though the Knicks did it in 6, and I never really felt like it was that close, it was a close series. Like the whole series was a close series, despite the fact that Knicks almost could have very theoretically, more than theoretically, could have swept that series. A good 6-game series for New York, and now they get to move on. But
at the very least, I'll say this: it should have been a 5-game series. That the overtime loss in New York was really a gut punch, but you did get the sneaking suspicion that as well as Philly played, in order for them to come back in that game and to be able to win it, it kind of felt like they had fired all of their guns, didn't it? Like they expended so much energy to make that happen that by the time they get home into Game 6, they come out flat. I mean, New York was the one that was hitting hard. Philly was so flat to start that first half. And then all of a sudden they woke up and it became a fight again.
It was like 17-5 or something in the first quarter, and I'm still like, I'm a
29-8 at one point, I think.
Yeah. Like I was like, okay, I give me this run in the third quarter. Like the first quarter, there's a lot of time left. And listen, Tyrese Maxey, logo threes, sending this team back to Philadelphia. As much as I love Jalen Brunson, it's a big error on his part that was that turnover at the end of Game 5.
It was, yeah.
That could have been basic. Well, could have been. Not everything's directly related, but it's not indirectly related.
Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson or was it Hartenstein? It was Anunoby. I think it might have been Hartenstein had a pretty big miscommunication there late too as well.
So a pretty good series, what I felt like was a New York series for the vast majority of it. When halftime happened and it was like the fact that Philly made their run at the end of the first quarter into the second quarter, it's just like, I don't know. I don't know about this game because then you get to Game 7, then it's anybody's. Then it goes straight up anybody's. But I like the fact that the Knicks moved on and we'll get an easy matchup against the Pacers.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, this won't be a complete Knicks-centric show, but we'll let you bask in the afterglow for a little bit here.
Yeah.
Indiana credit them. They put away Milwaukee. The Bucks put up a fight, but obviously were walking wounded, and that was a series where Milwaukee.
Man,
I mean,
we
said
talk
it
about this all the time. Injuries just are destroying these teams in the NBA, man, like in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But we had said even a fully healthy Milwaukee with Giannis, this was a bad matchup for the Bucks. And they had seen it all year. The Pacers wanted every bit of that smoke, to take on the Bucks, and playing at the speed that they do and getting in front of their home crowd, and then to do it against a limping Milwaukee team that was shorthanded, and then losing Lillard, and they lose, Bobby Portis to ejection in that previous game. They fought, but it never really felt like they had a chance, except to maybe win a game here or there, and that's exactly what happened. So now this is what to me makes this even more fun. Yes, the Knicks have advanced. That's a great storyline. Yes, they did it against Philly, who's a division rival. It's one of the old school NBA rivalries, but it had been, like 20 plus years, 30 years since the Knicks and the Sixers had met in the playoffs. Long time, just because neither of those two teams have been good at the same time over the last couple of decades. But now the Knicks get to play the Pacers in the second round. And you talk about, a rivalry that has been dormant for a long time, but boy, are there some chapters in that rivalry. To be able to go back and revisit that, I think that's something that, as an NBA fan, not as a Knicks fan, not as a Pacers fan, but as an NBA fan, I can get behind that and the nostalgia of that type of matchup. And then what also makes this fun is this isn't the old Indiana Pacers, New York Knicks slugfest mirror image of one another, where it literally was rock and a hard place fighting to get out of the East and, or face the Bulls in the end.
Very different teams.
Yeah, this is go gadget Pacers who finally have a team playing the way that the moniker says. I mean, it's basketball country, but Indianapolis is racing country too, and a team that races up and down the court. And you have a Knicks team that is still built on that toughness, that hard-nosed defense, but, and I will give Tom Thibodeau the credit, has diversified over the last couple of years to be top 10 in three-point attempts. They've been upping the pace every single year. Yeah. They have the ability to get down in the mud, and that's where they want to play, but they don't have to stay there all the time.
This was my issue, was it 2 years ago when the Knicks had their run in with Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Like they were a one-note team. The way that they were going to be able to win, and the way I thought they should have been able to win against Atlanta, it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah,
is that they were going to have to beat Atlanta up, and they couldn't beat Atlanta, and they couldn't make shots when they needed to make shots.
They had to get you into a stranglehold and keep you there, because otherwise they didn't really have any other moves, right?
Exactly. Fast forward a couple of years, this team has shooters. This team can play with pace. And this team has a flat-out number one scorer in this league. Much the same way I don't think people sort of expected this explosion from Shea Alexander over the last couple of years. I don't think people thought this explosion coming from former Dallas Maverick Jalen Brunson was going to be like this. And he has flat-out embraced that number one role. He's been worth every nickel that they've been able to get there with New York, and then some, because he's the reason this team can hum. And I think that's why the Tom Thibodeau style, it can be more effective, because if they can't slow down Indiana enough, or if they need to score some, they now have that ability to, in a game or two, score 120 if they need to, right? Like score 130 if they need to, once or twice maybe in the series. They like to keep that around 100, 105, 108, something like that. But if they need a handful of more buckets, they've got guys that can do it. And I don't know. I think this is where Indiana's road ends, because I think they are a younger team that sort of, this is kind of where that wall sort of gets hit a little bit. But I can't guarantee that. I cannot guarantee that Tyrese Halliburton is going to smoke this Knicks team for at least one game. At least one. He's going to smoke them for 45. He's going to. He's going to have one of those games. And is that a loss, or do you maintain? Is that one win? Because Jalen Brunson's thrown up, in this The Knicks have lost 2 of 3 against Indiana in this regular season, but the Knicks have also scored a ton of points against Indiana, and Indiana just scored more. And Jalen Brunson hasn't scored fewer than 28 in any of the games. In 2 of the games, he scored over 35. So it's not like you need Jalen Brunson to go for 40 and that guarantees you the win in this game either. It's a fascinating series. This is going to be a really interesting matchup to sort of watch between these two.
Indiana is one of those teams that if they get hot and they stay hot, it just becomes an avalanche, right? And there's not a whole lot that you can do against it. Well, you can do some things ahead of time, which the Knicks are very well equipped. Indiana's a bad defensive team, but they force turnovers. And when they, force those turnovers or defensive rebounds, that sort of thing, that's when they get out and run. And that's when they become infinitely more dangerous. New York is not a team that turns the ball over all that much. That's going to be in their favor. Indiana, of course, they're going to hit the glass hard. New York is a good rebounding team, a good gang rebounding team. That's going to take away some of those defensive rebounds that the Pacers may get, where then they're able to get out and run. New York has to stay on that offensive glass and try to control it. Just looking back at their schedule, too, for the Pacers, I was trying to figure out in the games against New York, how many of them did the Pacers actually have Pascal Siakam? We know that they didn't, the December game. So December 30th, right before the new year, no Siakam yet. But February 1st, they would have. And I'm missing a different one here late in the season. So it looks like 2 out of the 3 matchups, Siakam would have been there. Because that also, they put on February 1st and February 10th. That becomes
February 1st. Siakam started for them in that game. In the February 10th game, in which they lost, by the way, make sure to pay attention. That's the most recent game. He also went for 19 with them.
I think him and Aaron Nesmith, to me, are probably the 2 X factors in this series, because you're right. Halliburton's going to do his thing. His shooting has been a lot more volatile in the second half of the season, where he's had some really bad shooting nights and stretches, but he seems to be working out of that. The rest of Indiana's guys, they're going to find different people to step up. It may be Andrew Nembhard one night. It may be Obi Toppin like it was in Game 6, where he was phenomenal. TJ McConnell's going to do his thing and keep the pace of the game going for Indiana, even when Halliburton sits out. Siakam was really quiet in that game against Milwaukee in Game 6. He had bigger games during the series. Aaron Nesmith has been really impressive to me as a two-way player. But I think for both of them, they're going to need those guys to be on and to be able to create some offense for themselves or finish plays, so that it's not just dependent in transition. And Siakam is the guy who is capable of doing that. Nesmith is the sneaky one, because he may wind up with some more favorable matchups when the Knicks have to deploy somebody like OG Anunoby to check Siakam, or they've got to check, send Josh Hart against Tyrese Halliburton. They're not going to be able to cover everybody all the time. And I think Nesmith is a guy who is going to find himself open for some shots. He's going to find some seams, and he's going to have to be able to knock that stuff down in the half court for the Pacers starting lineup to be able to have a chance.
All right, let's move over to your team, who's also happens to find themselves in the semis. How about the Minnesota Timberwolves, taking no gruff from the Phoenix Suns? I'll tell you this. I've heard it from 2 people now. 2 people who I respect the opinion of. You tell me what you think about this. From Michael Wilbon, who, say what you want about his Pardon the Interruption hot take machine show. When it comes to NBA basketball, he knows his stuff, and I appreciate his opinion. Number 2, Charles Barkley. May have heard of him. Like the guy. Respect the opinion too. Both of those guys have said that they see a lot of Michael Jordan and Anthony Edwards. And it's hard to throw that praise out there for just sort of anybody. But man, Anthony Edwards is doing everything he can to earn those type of praiseworthy numbers. I mean, the fact that he's talking about his hero growing up being Kevin Durant, and then he just went after him, right? Like Anthony Edwards is a superstar, right, in this league. And that Minnesota team, looked mighty, mighty sporty. What did you think, first of all, of the way that they handled Phoenix in that series. And secondly, got a tough one coming back up with them Denver Nugs.
The most impressive thing to me for Minnesota was not the effort level or even Anthony Edwards, focus to go after Durant. And he also was focused on embarrassing Bradley Beal, who had said he wanted to guard Edwards, and Anthony Edwards made sure that became a nightmare. It wasn't just that, because I think those things were expected. It was the coaching and the scheme adjustment from Chris Finch. It was Anthony Edwards' adjustment. We talked about this last week, so I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but the Suns had the Wolves number all year, and they had moved the basketball. They had so many weapons. The Wolves had a lot of trouble trying to cover all of that. And then, what was really disturbing was the Suns, who are a decent defensive team. Minnesota could not crack it, and Anthony Edwards could not crack their defensive shell, and he was trying to so often on his own. They got into that series. The ball was moving. Edwards was making the right play 9 out of 10 times. And on the 10th time, his uber athleticism, oftentimes bailed him out on it. But Karl-Anthony Towns played a smart series, and the Wolves moved the ball. Their role players stepped up, and they played the brand of defense that we've seen from them all year, except previously against the Phoenix Suns. They were physical. They were on point. They were scrambling, but they communicate really, really well, and they wear you down. I mean, they've got the defensive player of the year anchoring the defense, quarterbacking the defense, and everybody else who has bought in to doing the right thing and playing within themselves. So it is a dangerous Minnesota team. They will go as Anthony Edwards goes, but he's not doing it by himself, not by a long shot. And I've said this a couple of times on this show. Minnesota is the team that matches up with the Denver Nuggets the best in the Western Conference. So now that I say that, of course, I'm gonna jinx it, but I said, they don't match up well with Phoenix at all. I don't think Minnesota matches up particularly well with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but then again, who does? But for Denver, Minnesota's got a huge front line. They've got a lot of bodies to throw at Jokic to just keep him busy. They've got wing defenders for days to throw at Jamal Murray, and they're a deeper team than the Nuggets are. They just are deeper. The Nuggets do not have a Bruce Brown and a Jeff Green to deploy with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to try to slow down Anthony Edwards. They've got KCP. They're going to throw Peyton Watson and Christian Brown into the mix, and they're going to see what they can do. Minnesota split the series with Denver, but it seemed like even in the games that they lost, they gave the Nuggets absolutely everything that the Nuggets could handle. And Denver is on record, both Mike Malone and a lot of the players, of saying nobody has played us harder and tougher over the last year and a half. So this dates back to last year in the playoffs when Denver beat Minnesota. Denver, in winning the championship, the Nuggets, even during the finals, said our toughest series was against the Wolves. And they've said that during the regular season too. So they know what's coming. Minnesota knows what's coming. This is one of those fun series in that they're division rivals. They've seen each other 4 times already. They saw each other in the playoffs last year. There are no surprises. Nobody's going to out-coach or out-adjust each other in this one. It's going to be show up, out-execute, and just slug this one out. I can't wait for this one.
Well, it's why I was going to ask you this next question. In those 4 games, Anthony Edwards went for 24, 30, 25, and 25. And by the way, he played, you remember this, he played 3 times in the last month of the season. Like, that's a lot of near-term familiarity with that team. For Minnesota to get past this division rival, is Anthony Edwards going to have to exceed those type numbers? Are we going to need to see a handful of superstar performances from him to get past the Nuggets?
Absolutely. Those late season games, Karl-Anthony Towns was not available. The loss against Denver on March 19th was a game that Minnesota had to rest just about everybody. I don't think Gobert played in that game. Mike Conley didn't play in that game. It was just a scheduled, everybody was dinged up at that point, and they decided to take the L, and they still only lost by 3. Edwards led them in all 3 categories: points, rebounding, and assists, playing with a lot of the backups. So yes, he needs to have a big series, but Karl-Anthony Towns needs to stay out of foul trouble and be that floor stretcher that keeps the lanes open, because that's what's going to give Anthony Edwards room to navigate. It's not just that Denver, they've got a couple of good defenders, like I said, who are going to take their cracks at Edwards. But Denver plays so together, and it is a big front line. Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon have good wingspan. They have got good mobility, good, length. Jokic is not a shot blocker, but he takes up so much space, and he's got good hands defensively. They can take away a lot of driving lanes. And this, again, is where Edwards cannot just lower his head like he used to and batter into the wall of the defense and hope that he gets bailed out on a call. It's going to be that drive, that kick to shooters like Nickeil Walker and Karl-Anthony Towns, and even Mike Conley. They're going to have to be ready and knock down those threes. Edwards, when he's got the lane, it might be a pull-up jumper. It might be that mid-range, that floater. But yeah, they're going to need absolutely everything from Edwards. These are the champs they're facing. And the champs, we saw what they did to the Lakers. There's no underestimating the Denver Nuggets, like none. Both of these teams have a ton of respect for each other. I have a ton of respect for the Nuggets. I in no way foresee this as being anything of an easy series, and Minnesota goes into this one as the underdogs, honestly.
I'd agree with that. I mean, the champs are the champs till you knock them out.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it's not like they're limping after, a 7-game series with Los Angeles. I mean, LA did get one in Los Angeles, but
and LA led 70% of the series, which is crazy. the minutes at least.
By the way, did you see a couple? You speaking of the fouling, did you see after Game 4 when Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns were doing their post-game press conference, and Edwards just looked over to Cat and was just like, "Stop effing fouling! You just got to stop effing fouling, man."
he is echoing every Wolves fan for the last 9 years, and especially the last 3, as Towns has gotten into veteran status and out of young guy status. It's like, really? Are we not there yet? And Towns will never be a good defender, but he can be smarter than he's been. And to his credit, he was during the Phoenix series. He really was. And I think we saw in the first half of the season when Minnesota got out to such a hot start, Towns had done a really excellent job of tightening up some of his worst habits. It really seemed like the second half of the year, and especially right before he got hurt and right after he got hurt and coming back, that a lot of those bad habits were creeping up again. So whether that's regression to the mean or just a blip, the Wolves are going to find out, but they're going to need Towns not to just be playing 22 minutes a game because he's saddled with 3-4 early fouls.
I think that's fair. Also nice by Karl-Anthony Towns to also sort of take that jest in stride, like in front of everybody, didn't just puff up and get kind of mad and defensive because what are you going to do, right?
I guarantee it's not the first time he's heard it from Ant or the coaching staff or anybody else.
And the way that Anthony Edwards said it too, it's just like so quiet, matter of fact, like just stop fouling, man, just stop effing fouling, like we'll be all right, just stop fouling. Last moment I want to bring on that Chris Finch, who is missing a leg right now. Did come back in lead practice, I think yesterday as we're speaking. So it's Thursday. He's running around on crutches. Missed the last minute of Game 4, basically. Huge missile, although they were up by 1,000. It felt like so the game was pretty much in hand. Do you worry at all that he may not be available for some part of the series?
It sounds like he's going to travel with the team. That's not a certainty, but it sounds like he will. He was already at practice, but he's got to get clear to be able to fly. The Wolves had not decided yet whether he's going to be up in the press box, back in the locker room, the ability to, I guess, basically consult during the game, or whether they can get him down to the sideline. Their lead assistant, Mike Inori, has coached a couple of games this year already where Chris Finch was sick or unavailable. Everybody speaks incredibly highly of Mike Inori, but at the same time, you want everybody there for a playoff game against the defending champs. This is no discredit to Micah, but I'm hopeful that he will. I found it really, really funny that among Chris Finch's first quotes back was that he wants to rescind the Teammate of the Year award from Mike Conley, who had just gotten it. He said, "You saw what Mike did to me. How did he get that award?" So they're all taking it in good stride, and in some way, I think the tightness of this team and the way that they all really do, especially Anthony Edwards and Towns, but they all really, really do seem to genuinely like Chris Finch and want to play hard for him. They respect him. It's been a great mix. In some ways, I think it may be inspirational to have him there and know you're playing for the guy on crutches who literally did take one for the team in that loss. I think that can be a rallying cry in some way, but I am hopeful that they can get him to the sidelines, even if, obviously he's not going to be up walking around. That may be Mike Inori who's standing near the scorer's table and doing some of those things. But to have Finch on the sideline and being able to talk directly to his assistants and to the players, it would be better than not. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say, but.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the East and let's talk about briefly the series that nobody wants to talk about. It's the Cavs and the Magic. They're finally getting on like not NBA TV, I think, for this for Game 6, and everyone's going to be like, "Oh, hey, this is a series going on too." Yeah,
both teams played hard.
Both teams played. That's right, my man. What do you make? What do you make of what you've seen so far? Cleveland has the chance to close this thing out. Mm-hmm. It's tonight, right? It's tonight, Friday night, for Game 6. I have been sort of struggling in this series to find it compelling by any way. And again, it's a 6-game minimum series that we're looking at, but it's just not been what I thought it was going to be, and it's been a lot of blowouts. It's
gotten better. No,
it's been a little better, yeah, but like I'm talking overall, right? Like,
yeah,
they want to get me in for a Game 6. Like, I just gotta like hoops to be able to watch this one because this one has not turned into the fun fest I thought it might be.
Well, the first 2 games were pretty miserable in Cleveland for sure, and you saw Orlando's youth. But then Orlando goes back home, and all of a sudden, with the crowd behind them, they kind of rediscover who they are. They blow the Cavs out in both those games. So lopsided, yes. But kind of inspirational to see the young guys go, oh, we can hang with Cleveland, and to really get behind it, and to see, Mo and Franz Wagner absolutely being WWE heels right now, just trying to get under the skin, not only of Cavs players, but the whole like Cleveland fan base. They've been all over it. To see Max Strus for Cleveland, who has struggled so heartily, and then comes alive in Game 5. He's a huge reason why the Cavs are able to hold on and win that one by 1 point. So it wasn't a blowout. And now I think it is intriguing. They go back to Orlando. You can't say that the Magic are wet behind the ears anymore. Like, they've been in this series. They've woken up. They've won a couple of games. They fought really hard for Game 5. It could have gone either way. They're going to get the home crowd behind them. I think the onus here really is on Cleveland. They're the veteran team. I know they're dealing with the Jared Allen injury, but they're the ones who are loaded. They're supposed to be an upper echelon Eastern Conference team, and they should have been able to put away a young Magic team like this. Now you got to go down to Orlando and try to win there and avoid a Game 7 where anything can happen. I think this is going to go to Game 7. Orlando they were inspirational at home. They were inspired at home. I think Cleveland needs to get back to, but a lot of the luster has come off of these Cavs for not being able to put away Orlando, who is a good team. But yeah, I feel like this is going to go 7, and this may be one of those where home court advantage is everything.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're Orlando, you got to feel good too, because that Game 5 loss was a close loss. Like, it was a good game.
1 point. Yeah.
So like you went back on the road and you faced your demons on the road, and you almost came away with that game. So why not feel good about yourself coming back home to be able to even up the series, and then feel good if you get that game to go on the road and sort of finally be the team that steals one from home.
Yeah. See what happens.
Yeah. Well, they'll take on. We can go ahead and get with them. They'll go on. The winner of this will go on eventually and take on the Boston Celtics, who, when you ask me, should Miami be, or should Boston be a little bit worried after that Game 2 loss? I was like, yeah, a little bit worried when a team goes that hot. And then Boston went to murder the Miami Heat for the next several games. They showed why Boston was the number 1 seed. They responded just like you would expect the number 1 beast like Boston is.
And Miami continued to hemorrhage healthy players. I mean, well, let's be real. It was not that hasn't stopped Miami before, but in this case, it was too much.
Thank you. Like, at some point, it did have to be too much, right? But you never freaking know, right? Um, so, um, Kristaps Porzingis. Let's see. What did I see? The most recent thing. He had that calf strain. I think at the end of game 4. Didn't play game 5. I think
Probably not coming back until the second half of this semifinal series.
I was
at the
about to say he's missing at
earliest.
least game 1. I didn't see the rest of the story on it. That's a big piece to miss, literally and figuratively. A big piece for them to miss, depending on who their opponent is. So we can talk about that more whenever we sort of start seeing them play.
I'll just say this: if I'm Boston and I know that I'm likely to be down Porzingis, I would rather see Orlando. Not only are they younger, but yeah, Paolo Banchero is an absolute load. He had 39 points and 8 boards in that game 5 loss. But that's why you have Evan Mobley. The Magic don't really have another big who is going to challenge Boston up front. And I should say the Cavs have Evan Mobley on Banchero right now. Boston is going to have to put Al Horford on Banchero and then try to see what happens after that. They'll rotate in Xavier Tillman. They'll rotate in Luke Cornett. But if I'm Boston, I can handle that. And I've got the wings to be able to take on Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs and anybody else Orlando wants to throw out there. If I have to see Cleveland, Jared Allen is going to come back. Now you've got that monster Cleveland front line of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen together, and you've got the Cleveland wings. And even though Cleveland has been less than confidence inspiring here during this series, I think they are the tougher matchup for Boston in the end. They're more seasoned, more firepower, and most importantly, far bigger on that front line.
Yeah, I don't know really much else to say about Boston, especially since we don't know who their opponent technically is right now. But I'm with you. If I'm Boston, I don't think Boston's really that worried. But if you had your druthers, I sit there and let me just say this, and I still believe it as of right now. The toughest series for Boston will be in the Eastern Finals. If it's New York, I think it's a slightly tougher series than Indiana, but I think Indiana could put up a heck of a fight against Boston. So I think Cleveland or Orlando will be maybe 6 game. Maybe if it's Orlando, that's probably a sweep. That's probably a sweep at this point. But
Orlando, I'll say, gets 1 at home. Orlando loses in 5. I think the Magic get 1 at home.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. You've been righter on the Orlando more than I have been. But I think whoever comes out of the other series for Boston will be the one that'll be able to give them the best chance to knock them off here in the East. To the West we go. Where how about the Oklahoma City Thunder, huh? Untouched in this here postseason. 4-0 over the New Orleans Pelicans. How about the fact that Zion's just never going to get to see the playoffs? Like, he's just never, like, he's a lottery pick that was picked 5 years ago. His team's been in the playoffs multiple times since he's been drafted, and he still doesn't get to see the playoffs. It's a sort of a tough scene, really, for him. I hate to sort of see that because you want to see an explosive type player like that be on the court. But again, injuries sort of dictated the NBA for a while now when it comes to the postseason. But what'd you make of OKC making short work and easy work of the Pelicans? That's veteran type work.
I'll give credit to the Pelicans. It wasn't easy work. The Pelicans, again, they fought. They had their moments, but the Thunder continue to impress. I mean, and yes, they were in the play-in last year, but to get to this stage already as the number 1 seed, granted, New Orleans was wounded, not entirely that much more veteran and playoff season than the Thunder are. It would have been different if, OKC had to go up against the Lakers or the Warriors in the opening round, something like that, where their youth might have been exposed a little bit. But they've just been disciplined. They play within themselves. They have their identity. Chet Holmgren was fantastic in the series. So was Shea, but they always are. And Jalen Williams just continues to look like an absolute stud. And the second best player already on that team, third best player. It's what's scary about them is they're such a wild card in the playoffs right now. I've said they're the most dangerous team in the playoffs. They have the highest upside if they can reach there. At some point, their youth is going to get tested. But this is not like a young team that solely has relied on their athleticism, or just is so wet behind the ears, but so uber talented. They've been disciplined all year. That's how they've gotten to the number 1 seed. So the scary part is, as much of a wild card as they are right now, we're just seeing them opening the door to their championship window. And you're going, how good and how scary can this team be over the next 5 years? Yes, their bench will get expensive and they're going to lose some of those guys, but they have so many draft picks. They're just going to continue to cycle in young energy players around this starting lineup. And yeah, we know nothing's guaranteed. We said the same thing about the Durant, Harden, Westbrook, Ibaka Thunder a long time ago. And that window was one finals appearance before things went sideways. But this Thunder team just feels different, man. You don't see a glaring weakness or a glaring question mark like you even did between Russ and KD, where it was like, who's the man? And is Russ like shooting them out of games at times? And is he too volatile? The fact that he can't shoot, are they missing a stopper up front besides Ibaka? There was questions. With the Thunder, the big question was, are they too young? And is the bench anywhere near good enough? Both of those have been answered positively now all season long, to the point that they're not a question anymore. And that is scary, scary, scary.
Yeah, they've won 9 straight games. Like in the regular season, hot to be able to get the tiebreaker to get the number 1 seed. And as you mentioned, Chet Holmgren has been phenomenal overall this season. In the postseason, he's played really, really well in his sort of real debut for a series here against what could have been potentially, I mean, obviously wasn't a semi-formidable team underneath for New Orleans. And now they'll have to move on and sort of see if they can continue to get past through that youth phase, because they will play a much more veteran team when they come back, when they come up in the next series, no matter who that is. But I've been sort of impressed with the way Chet's played. Shea's played fantastic. They have had some close calls where in this series where if the youth was going to get to them and have them drop a game, it sure didn't. It could have.
Great point.
And it didn't. And they played low-scoring games in this matchup. New Orleans tried to muck it up some with them, and still OKC said, we're thicker, we're deeper, we're better, we're girthier, we got more for you. And so to be able to sweep that series, sweeps are hard, man. Sweeps are hard, even if it is a Zion-less New Orleans Pelicans. Like
and a 1-8 matchup.
Miami got a game. Miami went hot and got like 23 threes, and like they got a game over Boston. Boston's the best team in the league right now. So it's tough. Speaking of the best team in the league, maybe it's OKC. They're going to have to take on the winner of the Los Angeles Clippers of LA and the Dallas Mavericks series. Dallas leads at 3-2 right now. After Dallas, did you know that 30-point loss that Dallas just put up on the Clippers was the worst postseason loss in franchise history for the Clippers? For a team so bad for so long.
Well, they never got into the postseason. That's how you explain that one away.
Solid point. So their losses have been like 3 total losses in the postseason. But
all of them by Doc Rivers, and all down 3-1.
Mr.
Or up 3-1, I should say. Up 3-1.
Joel, that's rude. That's mean. That's very hurtful. So let's see what is that game's tonight too. All right, Clippers and Mavericks going to key it up again for game 6. It's been an intriguing series. It's been a chippy series. It's been a little all over the place, but I've not been bored by it. So, do you think Dallas close it out at home tonight?
I think so. Kyrie Irving has been really...
Despite the fact that Kawhi has big hands.
Kyrie Irving has played the best basketball I've seen from him since...
He's been really good. I hate him. He's been really
since
good.
The Cavs won the championship.
He's been really good.
And some of those years where he was really locked in and kind of had his role and was owning it. And what I really appreciated is that in game 4, he steps up, or game 5, I should say, he steps up and they run the offense through him, because Luka is banged up. That's no secret. And the Clippers have been keying off on Luka so much, as expected, that Dallas, flipped the script. And it's one of the things that I will credit Jason Kidd. He's He's tough to gauge as a coach sometime about how good he actually is, but the guy has never been afraid of thinking outside the box or just making adjustments. Sometimes it seems wilder for the sake of adjustments, but they run everything through Kyrie in game 5. He did fantastic. It wasn't just, oh, now's my chance to get as many shots as I want. He was initiating, he was setting people up. He really filled the same role that Luka would have, and it allowed Luka to then pick his spots. Kyrie's been fantastic. And Dallas, the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford improvements there. There's a lot of ink that's already been spilled on this one, but those two guys fitting seamlessly. And I think even more importantly, then it's moved a couple of the other bigs to depth bench roles that fit them. Derek Lively as a rookie can come in with the second unit, not necessarily get exposed. Maxi Kleber, who is fighting back from injury and has really been struggling and rusty since he's been back this year. But now all of a sudden in the playoffs, he keeps getting warmer and warmer. And he had a great game 5 as a release valve shooter for them. That's a fantastic role for him off the bench and to pair him and Lively. The Mavs can't do that if those two guys were having to start, which is the way, much of this season went with Lively, and they had Grant Williams in the power forward spot. So Gafford and PJ Washington's ability to play good defense, to block shots, and then to play above the rim to get out and run has opened things up again for Dallas. It's allowed Derek Jones Jr., who I thought was he was in over his head as a starter, I thought, but I've thought that at many of the places where he's been given a starting shot, to his credit and to the Mavs' credit, now all of a sudden he fits with that group. And I really think it's because PJ Washington and Gafford are there. Derek Jones can be a defender, but he's another guy who can play above the rim, and he's been knocking down some threes. So yeah, I'm picking Dallas here. The Clippers without Kawhi, it's different. And you saw already in game 5, bad James Harden coming back, where, oh, things are getting tight. The series might be on the line. Oh, everyone's relying on me. I'm going to stop shooting as much. I'm going to start moving the basketball. That's the James Harden that reared its ugly head way back in Oklahoma City, in Houston, at all of his playoff stops when he has struggled in the playoffs. When he is intimidated and when the lights shine the brightest, Harden stops shooting. So you talk about, like in the past, fake tough guys. Harden to me is a fake clutch guy. And
he got so much praise at the beginning of this series because he,
and rightly
people are like,
so.
he could score, and like, yeah, okay, well,
and rightly so.
It's early in the series. The series isn't on the line right now. Like, you want to win those games, and I think he was the leading scorer in game 1, if I'm not mistaken, and in a game that they won. But you're right. This is kind of what we see from James Harden when it comes to this time of a series, right? And you can't change a tiger's stripes, right? Like you're just not going to. This is kind of who he is, right? And that's why you were trying to build a team up around him so he didn't have to be the guy in these types of series. But then when they're not there, or when playoff Paul comes and shows his ugly head, despite the fact he had one good run 1 year to try to get rid of that stigma. Like what Paul George had 15 points last game.
15 points. He did have 11 boards, but he's minus 16 on the floor. And Harden, 7 points, 7 assists, minus 25, 2 of 12 from the field, 1 of 7 from 3. And most of those threes felt like bailouts where he was just taking a shot because he didn't want to do anything else with it. You are right. That's where you need absolutely a Kawhi Leonard, because Russell Westbrook, 2 of 11 in that game, minus 13 on the floor, 6 points, 0 of 3 from downtown. Russell Westbrook, for everything he does playing hard, is not a guy that you're running plays for in clutch because he can't shoot. And if you have 2 other guys that when things are getting tight and they're falling behind, it's just not been in their makeup, and Paul George a little bit better than Harden, you need a Kawhi Leonard, and they don't have a Kawhi Leonard, and that's where all of a sudden the Clippers look really, really vulnerable.
Here's Paul George, right? His numbers. In game 1, 22, game 2, 20, game last game, 15, 33, 7, 22, 22. Those are his last 3 for in the 5 games there, right? In the games where he's scored 15 points, 13 shots, 11 shots in the other loss, 14 shots in the other. Their 2 wins, 19 shots and 20 shots. Like, Paul, you got to shoot, man.
They're
not gonna shoot
deferring
and
to
Harden's
role
not gonna
players.
shoot. Huh?
Yeah, they're deferring to role players. I saw multiple times where instead of initiating a play, Paul George is kicking to Amir Coffey, or Terrence Mann is getting the kick out from James Harden. Those are fine role players. But if you are deferring to them late in a shot clock, it is damningly obvious why you are doing that. It's not just, oh, I was making the right play and they were open, because you were taking those shots early in the series. You are taking those shots in games that you're up. But now all of a sudden when you're down and trying to come back, now you're deferring and the ball starts playing hot potato. The Clippers had bad body language in that game, and they were at home.
Yeah. All right. So what we essentially have in our minds is flat out determined what the semis are going to look like. So I'm going to ask you this, Joel, as we get out of here. I'm going to ask you the winner and how many games. You ready?
Yep.
Let's start with where we just were. The OKC Thunder look like they're going to take on the Dallas Mavericks at the 1-5 matchup. Joel, who wins? How many games?
I originally predicted at the start of the playoffs Dallas over OKC in 7. Mm-hmm. I will take Oklahoma City in 7.
I think that's I don't want to be in a position to think anything nice of a certain guy. So I'm going to say OKC in 7 as well. Okay. I think if they're not blitzing through Dallas, and they're not going to just destroy them. No. They're going to have to sort of respond to some losses finally. I don't know how that youth's going to hold up, but I do think relatively well. But they're going to have to slog it out. And I think having Game 7 at home is going to be.
Yeah. Everything's dependent on Luka's injury.
That's a fair point too. Mm-hmm. Let's stay in the West. The winner of that will take on the winner of the Nugs and the Timberwolves. You do not have to recuse yourself from this, Mr. Timberwolf yourself. So how many games will it take Minnesota to dispatch of the defending champs?
I mean,
the guy who's about to win another MVP as well.
This felt like a 7-game series too. Originally I wrote down Denver in 7 over Minnesota. So I'm going to have to stick with that one, as much as it pains me to say that. I do think the champs, they've got something that Minnesota is searching for and maybe 1 year away from. We've seen the times that Minnesota, like, their chemistry can be tested, and we've seen the times where Towns can be his own worst enemy, and that's going to happen a couple of times in this series.
This will be by far the best of the 7-game series, or the best of the semifinals we're going to see. Mm-hmm. This will go 7, but I will take Minnesota in the 7.
I appreciate
it. You're welcome. I think repeating is really, really hard to do. Mm-hmm. I think Minnesota has been through that youth struggle already. Yep. I think they're ready to break through.
They got plenty of veterans. They got plenty of depth.
They have plenty of depth, and they've got the superstar. They've got the superstar that can help them get over that hump and get through the Denver Nuggets. I'll be honest with you, I don't like how close the Lakers series was, despite the fact that it was 5 games.
True.
I don't like the fact that that Los Angeles basically, had they been able to sort of mind their P's and Q's for a couple of games, could have found themselves in a Game 7 with Denver themselves and possibly win that thing. So I will take Minnesota to take down the beast there. To the East we go. We're going to look at the Boston Celtics taking on what I assume we both have as the Cleveland Cavaliers going through. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one to pick, but for the sake of this, we'll take the Cavs because they're up.
Yeah. All right, Celtics. I think we sort of talked about this already a little bit. I have the Celtics sweeping whoever comes out of there. I think the Celtics are. I think it's
even with Porzingis hurt. Even with Porzingis hurt,
it's Orlando. I should say it's a sweep for Orlando. I think it's 5 if it's Cleveland. So it's going to be Cleveland. I think Cleveland loses in 5.
I'll take that as well. Boston in 5, maybe in 6, but yeah, we'll go 5 for the.
And finally, the second round of the sweeps that the Knicks are going to be able to put out there. It's against the Indiana Pacers. Mm-hmm. That first game's Monday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Monday, the Knicks and the Pacers battle it out. New York, they're the higher seed. So, Joel, how many games does it take New York to dispatch of the Pacers? I'm not leading you in any direction.
Knicks in 6. I'll go Knicks in 6. But that's that. That is one of those, and I guess every single series, it feels like either team could win. That's how the semifinal should be. Feels like the Pacers have a chance, but there's only a specific way that the Pacers can have that chance. New York, it feels like there are more different pathways that see them win that series. So that's why I'm taking the Knicks.
I think that's a pretty good assessment. I think the Knicks in 7.
Okay.
I think Indiana's got something that can push them. But again, I think the youth and sort of the not being here as a group yet sort of befalls them a little bit. And I think that's where New York's going to be able to sort of. I think if New York can withstand at least one of the Halliburton nuts games, because he's going to do it for probably at least 2, to be honest with you. If one of those he goes for 45, the Knicks are still able to win. Because look, Jalen Brunson went for 39, I think, in their last game, and the Knicks lost. So I mean, you can't. It obviously happens. A guy can go nuts and you lose. If the Knicks can do that, then I think it might be able to be 6. But I think it's going to be tough.
I'll take you one step further. The Knicks, despite having home court advantage, have to win at least once in Indiana.
Yeah, and you know
it's going to be loud.
It's Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's going to be loud. It's going to be a nightmare in there. They're not going to be able to just walk in and buy up all the tickets in Indianapolis. Part of that's proximity, but like it's going to be different. It's going to be much different than going on the road to Philly was. And New York's got to be able to win a game there to be able to win the series.
What'd you make of the fact that the Knicks were able? We haven't talked since that. The Knicks were able to get so many seats in Philadelphia. Like that's rough play, man. Like,
it's not surprising. They're so close. If you're coming out of New York, I mean, you can afford playoff level tickets for the people who could afford Knicks games. That means they can afford a Sixers
but there wasn't a deluge from Sixers fans to stop that, or like some teams like to do, like especially in hockey, where they like to sort of you have to have a certain area address, like a certain state address, to be able to get these things.
Philly may want to think about doing that in the future because clearly they didn't. But
well, they ended up buying 2,000 or 3,000 seats or something.
Late
the first responders.
You should have done that the whole series, knowing what
But
what
they
it
were
was.
probably like, look, guys are going to show up, right? Not the Knicks fans are going to be able to buy all these tickets from us.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is distance. There's going to be some Knicks fans in Indianapolis. There's going to be some Knicks fans wherever you go. It's a big market team. It's a long-standing team. And the NBA is global. There's going to be random fans from any team that goes on the road anywhere. It's not going to be like it was in Philly. And again, it would have been the same if they were playing in Brooklyn or any of the Eastern, even in Boston, Knicks fans would have traveled up there. It's close. But now being so far away, it's going to be
you're not getting thousands of Knicks fans in Boston. No, you'll scatter a few hundred of the
right,
Boston
and they'll be loud, but the Celtics fans will be loud too. So yeah, it was kind of a microcosm of the situation, and the Sixers organization probably could have handled the ticket process a little bit better.
A little bit better? A little bit better?
It is what it is. I mean, anybody should be able to buy a ticket, and kudos to Knicks fans if they put their money down and did it. And, it's more, the bigger question to me is how many Sixers fans had tickets and sold them to make some money and didn't really care who they were selling their tickets to? Well, that's the bigger question for me.
I'll tell you this. There is a thing that happens every year in Major League Baseball. It's the Cincinnati Reds. They always host the very first game of Major League Baseball season, and it's kind of become this tradition, right? The Reds for long stretches of time have been terrible. So season ticket holders will literally just have the tickets and make up a giant portion of their money win the first game of the season, no matter who it is. So they'll sell them to the visiting fans.
Yeah.
It don't matter to make up some of that money because it's such a high ticket. That's. I mean, I don't know.
It makes sense.
I don't. I mean, I might do it, but I mean, come on. I would never be caught as a Philadelphia 76ers fan, to be honest with you.
But yeah, if it's a playoff game and you're a Sixers fan, Don't sell your tickets. And
Go
if
to the
you do,
game.
yeah.
Go to the game. You clearly care enough to have the ticket. Go to the game. Jeez, go to the game. That was the game that you wanted. That was Joel Embiid's game. Right?
Could have been handled better.
No, game
Could have
four
been handled better.
that was the
That's all there
Jalen
is to
Brunson
it.
game. That was the MVP game. Anyway, all right. All right, that's going to do it for that, Joel. This podcast is what I like to call OVA. It's over. Joel, would you say goodbye to the good people?
Thanks and goodbye, good people. We'll see you on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, and YouTube if you want the video version of this. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. One step closer to that Knicks Timberwolves NBA Finals. Keep the dream alive.
Wait, man, they're really going to force us to go to one of the games, aren't they? Actually, we're going to have to go to one in Minnesota and one in New York just to do it.